Uh, Good evening, everybody. It is wonderful to be celebrating our first pre-Pesach Seder prep program. In lieu of having an in-person meeting, we're doing this online, and we're excited to be doing this with everyone here. I'm just going to start by saying like this. You know, many times we get lost in doing things the way we've always done it. You know, the way I experience Purim is the way I've experienced it as a child. The way I experience Hanukkah is the way I experienced it as a child. And particularly Pesach is the holiday. And by the way, Rosh Hashanah as well, Yom Kippur. Many times we just do the same things we did as children. We mentioned this morning in our class. And we have to break away from that this Pesach and not allow ourselves to just do things the way we always did it. And that's the goal of this program tonight, is that for the majority of people out there, I'm saying this out of years of people asking me questions about the Seder, basing everything that they know on what they saw on Charlton Heston's 10 Commandments. And that's their image of what Pesach is all about. So that's what we're trying to change. And that is my short introduction to everything. But before we do that, I'm going to turn the floor now to Rabbi Chaim Busko, who's going to talk to us a little bit about what we do before Pesach, and what is important for us to think of when we plan for the Seder. Where you are unmuted. Go.
Okay, thank you very much. Welcome, everyone. So we have several mitzvahs, big mitzvahs that are coming up for Pesach. We have telling over the story for your children. We have eating matzah, eating maror, drinking 4 cups of wine. All of these mitzvahs take place on the night of Pesach. There's one big mitzvah which needs to be done beforehand, and that's getting rid of your chametz. And this is one of the most important mitzvahs we see in the Torah from how stringent it is. And therefore, I'm just going to give us a quick overview of what we need to do practically to rid ourselves of this chametz. Why are we getting rid of chametz? First, what is chametz? Chametz is leavened bread, anything that's had a chance to ferment, usually with yeast or something like that. Crackers and bread, those are the obvious things. But even things that people might not expect, like beer or some kinds of vodka. There's a lot of things. I'm not going to go through an extensive list here. You should consult your rabbi afterwards for details about all of these things, but we're just going to do a quick overview of what needs to be done. There are 4 main things that I want to talk about. Number 1 is involved in getting rid of your chametz is number 1, you could sell. We'll talk about that very briefly. You must check for chametz. We'll talk about that. Check your house for chametz. You will do a nullification of your chametz. And finally, you will physically destroy your chametz. So we'll talk about all of these things very briefly right now. In terms of selling your chametz, this can get very complicated. And therefore, please contact your rabbi for how to do this. They will send you a form where you will give power of attorney to whichever rabbi you're going to do this through, and they will effectively guide you through the process and show you how to rid yourself of things that you might want to sell. And that not only includes things that might be in your pantry, like a bottle of whiskey, but let's say pots and pans that you use for bread all year round, that they may have little particles of chametz in there. So these kinds of things, if you want to go full out, all these things can be sold, and we can send you a form for how to do that. Okay, let's move on. Next is the night before Pesach, which means Tuesday night. There's a mitzvah to check your house or all of your premises for chametz. And there are different customs for practically how to do this. Some say that the best way to do it is with a lot of light, right? Like we have to turn all the lights on so you can find it the best. Some like to go the traditional method, which is there are Kabbalistic implications behind it, where going through with a feather and move things with a feather and a candle so you can check the little nooks and crannies of everywhere you need to go. During this process, you want to have cleaned everything already by this point. You don't want to start your cleaning process right then. You want to know pretty much where everything is. There is a very nice custom to hide 10 pieces of chametz, maybe like a little piece of bread, put them in plastic bags so they don't crumble up around. Have someone hide it around the house. It's a lot of fun. And go through to ensure that you'll check in a very good way. Where do you need to check? Things that there could be any sort of reasonable doubts that there could end up chametz there. If you have a house with children in it, that means anywhere, right? But otherwise, things that you might not expect, it could fall behind the piano or fall behind anywhere that it might possibly go, you should check there. Okay, that happens the night of the night before Pesach. That's going to be Tuesday night. After you check, everyone, if you have a Seder, printed in there is going to be something that you'll say right after the checking. By the way, there's a blessing on the checking, and you shouldn't speak from beginning until end of the checking. And then after that, there's a piece that you say which nullifies any chametz that you don't know about. If there's something that you haven't found or you forgot about, you missed while you were checking, you're mentally nullifying it, declaring that to you it's worthless and it's not part of your property anymore. Okay, that effectively relinquishes it from your property. Now, there might still be chametz that you know about that you're planning on eating for breakfast. That's fine. This nullification is for things that you don't know about. Now, the next morning, that's going to be Wednesday morning. There are two things. One is the time for destroying your chametz. Now, the best way to do this, if you have a fire, like make a bonfire and throw them all in there, that might be a little bit difficult this year. But anyway, you can destroy them, preferably in fire. Throw your chametz into that fire and get rid of it. And afterwards, you're going to do one final nullification. The text of that print is also going to be printed in your Seder. Say it in a language that you understand. It's vital that you understand what you're saying when you're doing this. Otherwise, you're just reciting a worthless incantation. There is a deadline for both of these things. I don't have the exact time. Can someone look up quickly?
Yeah, I'll add it right away.
Okay, there are times for when is the last time you can burn your chametz and when's the last time you can eat your chametz. And Rabbi will have that printed right away.
I'll post it in the chat in a minute. Thank you very much, Rabbi Busco. I just want to remind everyone that although we burn the chametz the morning before Pesach, which is going to be Wednesday morning, today the rabbis locally and globally have said not to do it this year because those are usually done in a public place. And today, because of the social distancing of our environment that we're in right now, it has been very clearly said not to do that, certainly not to do it in our own backyard and, God forbid, endanger our own property with fire and things like that. So therefore, use precaution. We can talk privately about it after. I would like to turn the floor to Rabbi Cohen, who's going to give us a brief 2-minute introduction to we're going to go each of the rabbis quickly and give 2 minutes as to what should be our focus when we have the Seder in our homes.
Okay. Hey, everybody. Glad to be here. Okay. As Rabbi Chaim Busco already said, we have, I believe there are 2 mitzvahs from the Torah that we have to focus on fulfilling. And the 2 mitzvahs from the Torah, and there's 3 from the rabbis. The 2 mitzvahs from the Torah are eating the matzah, and the other mitzvah is telling the story of us going out to Egypt. Those are the 2 mitzvahs directly from the Torah. The other 3 are, I believe, the hallel, the wine, and help me out, guys. I'm sure there's a third one. Hallel, the 4 cups. Okay, so the idea here is of the Seder and the telling of the story and the matzah, and every single thing is supposed to bring us to emunah. Everything is supposed to get to the point of emunah, that to deepen, heighten, and the interesting thing is the name of Pesach, that means Passover classically. Actually, the way that we always understand it in the deeper mystical realms is that, yes, Passover, yes, we know the historical event that God passed over the houses of all of the Jewish people, but it also is a passing for us, a Passover for us, which meaning here's the night where you can actually reach a higher level. Usually in climbing or growing, you have to go from 1 level to 2 level to 3 level to 4 level to 5. Here, no, they're skipping. It is the night where you can skip and do the quantum leap of emunah, of faith, connection to God. We do that by telling the story of Egypt, of us going out of Egypt, and we see the miracles that God did for us. We integrate those miracles, but at the same time, inside and during the eating of the meal, I think one of the rabbis who spoke at the Partners in Torah a few weeks ago said, you got to tell your story, because then you tell your story, and then you see how God is in your life. You have to see God in all of our lives, in the lives of the Jewish people. Now, to end with this, it brings down in Siman Tuf Pei, that's 480, in the Shulchan Aruch, the Ramah, Rabbi Moshe Isserles brings down. At the end of the Seder, after we're working on our emunah, we reach a level of emunah where we open our doors. We open our doors classically in order that he brings down to give the lizkor, to remember that it is Leil Shimurim, it is a night that God is watching over us. In other words, we have a heightened sense of bitachon, of trust in God, of security. And therefore, and listen, he says this is going to be amazing because this is where we're trying to go to. Ubischus emunah zu yavo Mashiach. And in the merit of this, Mashiach comes. In other words, we have the potential every single Seder night to reach a heightened level of trust and faith in God and connection where we can reach it and open the door. We open the door for Elijah the prophet and boom. That's what the Seder is for. Handing it over to you, our Rabbi Wolbe.
Excellent. Rabbi Bosco, what's your introduction to the objective of the Seder?
Oh, so I thought I gave my introduction already. I'll add one more point. I'll just elaborate for 15, 20 seconds on what Rabbi Cohen said, is that I'll put in one more thing. That going into the sea itself, I'll tell you like this. When they were running away from the Egyptians, Moses was standing at the sea and he starts to cry out to Hashem. And Hashem responds something perplexing. Hashem says, what are you crying out to me for? Just tell the children of Israel to go through the sea. Now, at that point, the sea hadn't split already. So there's two very strange things here. First of all, why is he telling him why are you crying out to Hashem? What's a Jew supposed to do in a time of trouble if not to cry out to Hashem? And second of all, what's he telling them that they should go into the sea? The sea is an ocean. Where are they supposed to go? There's no concept of the sea splitting yet. That was miraculous. So the Orach Chaim HaKadosh says like this. He says that the truth is that there was a lot of complaints against the Jewish people and how they had behaved in Egypt, and really they were undeserving of salvation coming out of Egypt. So Moshe says, what are you praying for me for? What are you praying to me for? It's as if I can't help you. It would be unfair. You don't deserve it, but I'll give you some advice. Here's what you can do. Tell the children of Israel to just go into the sea because it hasn't split yet. As a result of their expression of pure faith, just like opening that door, showing that we're not afraid, as a result of the expression of emunah, then they will merit that salvation. I think that's where the Ramah is coming from over here also, where he says that by opening that door, that merits us, the Mashiach should come. So this is an expression of us being able, we take that first step. We make a jump in emunah, and that brings salvation into our lives. So this same idea, I just wanted to elaborate a little bit.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Bosco. Rabbi Wogelarter.
All right. I believe that the objective of the Seder is, in one line, not to get bogged down by the text of the haggadah. Don't be overwhelmed. There's a lot of words here, and there's a specific order to those words, and there's a lot of paragraphs, and there's a lot to be spoken about. But don't allow yourself to get trapped in just simply and merely understanding the words in front of you and not using the haggadah and the night of the Seder as a tool for your personal growth. And so the main point is, for sure, emunah is building on your faith. But we know that the exile that we experienced in Egypt is, so to speak, the quintessential exile. It includes all exiles that we as a nation will ever experience. And the rabbis tell us that not only we as a nation are included in our national exiles that we are continuing right now to experience, but it includes our personal exiles and our personal metzarim, our personal constricted spaces, our personal hard times. And so when we're reading the text of the Haggadah, it has to not only speak to us on a national level, but it has to be able to speak to us on a personal level. And when we talk about freedom, we're not only talking about freedom for a nation, but we're talking about our own personal freedom from the things that keep us shackled, from the things that keep us tied up, from our own enslavement, from those bad character traits or actions that we are engaged in, activities that we're engaged in, that we know deep down, that's not really who I am. I'm chained to that action. But the Haggadah is, we need to see it as a vehicle to allow us to escape those things as well on a personal level. And so that's what I mean, that elicited some chuckles. But that's what I mean, is not to get bogged down, is because sometimes we can spend a lot of time, and we're going to spend some time tonight dealing with the words of the Haggadah and understanding them as the vehicle, but also this underlying message of the Haggadah, this guide to personal freedom that we will eventually reach by the end when we say Chad Gadya together at the end of the Seder. And I think we're going to go into more specifics as we go through, but that's what I think the objective of the Seder is.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Wogelarter. Just my little thing that I like to talk about every year is that Judaism is very unique, that we are the only religion that I'm aware of that doesn't only allow questions, but begs for us to ask the questions. Because when we are seeking truth, the only way you find truth is when you ask questions. And that way you can cut away all of the baloney, and you can cut away all of the facade, and you get down to what's real and what's truth. And because the Torah is emes, God's name is Hashem Elokeichem emes, it's truth, then by asking questions, we only dive deeper into the truth. Pesach is a time where we try to get into it. Let's ask as many questions as possible. I try to make a contest with my children to whoever can ask as many questions as possible. Let's get them involved. Let's get them engaged in the conversation as well. So that's my objective of the Seder, is to get the children to ask as many questions as possible. That's number one. Number two is, like, I want to echo what the previous rabbi said, is that we need to feel ourselves that we are leaving Egypt, right? We have to try to, we have to envision ourselves not only being back in Egypt 3,300 years ago, but today we have our own limitations. Today we have our own restrictions, things that we're limiting ourselves many times. Sometimes it could be our culture, but this is a time to break away from it. So now we're going to just jump right into the Haggadah.
Can I jump in? You just said jump in, so that's my cue. Can I jump in? I think that everyone is going to present ideas, and in a normal year, I think that we're very focused on the children. I think there's a unique challenge this year in that many families will not have children at the Seder. People will be celebrating the Seder and Pesach alone. And without children. And I think that I know for sure when I speak of talking to the children and eliciting questions from the children, I think Rabbi Wolbe would agree that there's a child inside of each and every one of us. And there's a part of us that doesn't have a fully formed brain, right? That's the beauty of children. And there's a part of us that can still be molded, no matter how old we are. And so as we go through and we talk about the children, not only are we talking about actual children at the Seder, which may be some of our experience this year, but we're also talking about the child inside of us, that part of us that's not fully formed, that's able to tap into being molded and growing through the haggadah. So I just thought it was worthwhile pointing out, make sure that it really is applicable to every single person in every single situation, the lessons that we're going to talk about as we go through the haggadah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so now we're going to begin with the actual order of the Seder. Seder means order. And so just to put things into context, we have a Seder plate in front of us. The Seder plate will have either a shank bone, an egg, a little bit of bitter herbs. It'll have some karpas, which is like either a vegetable. Some people have celery. Some people have potatoes, and then you have as well charoses, which is like it looks like the cement that was used for and that's what we'll dip those bitter herbs into so just so that you have the context. There's an order to the entire Seder, which is why it's called a Seder, which means order. So we're going to jump right in, and each one of the stages, one of the other rabbis will take over. We're going to begin with Rabbi Cohen, who is a Kohen, so he always gets first dibs, and he's going to start with Kaddish. You're muted, Rabbi.
Okay, great. Kaddish. Interesting thing, Kaddish. You know, it's really, there's an order of 15 orders in the Seder. It's 15 steps. I call it like, you know, they have the 12 steps. This is like the 15th step in recovery. And the first thing is, of course, Kaddish, which is we have to sanctify the day. Simply with a cup of wine, we sanctify the day and do as usual as following in terms of whatever the text is that's in like we do Kiddush on Shabbos, like we do Kiddush. It is a Yom Tov, and therefore we always want to sanctify the day. Just to get a little bit of more of an inner direction, of course. The interesting thing is you'd have the order of the 15 steps. It's Kadesh or Chatz. First there's a washing, and then there's a Kiddush, and then there's a washing. So most people think, okay, Kadesh, sanctified. We have to understand who we are. We sanctify the day with a cup of wine. And then there's Chatz, washing. Usually you would think in order to sanctify myself, in order to be closer to God, I'd have to wash myself first. I have to wash off all my negativity. The answer is no. We do Kiddush first, and then you'll go into washing your hands. So the idea here is the holiness is always there, okay? So the first thing that we start is Kiddush, and that's what Kadesh is. Back to you, Rabbi Wolbe.
Rabbi Busko.
Okay, next up is urchatz. Urchatz means washing, means and wash. So we're gonna do, why are we washing now? First of all, a lot of people know if you grew up like this, you wash without a blessing, right? Why are we doing this? Because we're gonna do the thing right after it, which is called karpas. And karpas is some vegetable. And the idea is that since we're going to be dipping the karpas in liquid, in water, kind of going into karpas already, but since we're going to be doing that, there's a law that anytime you're going to be eating some sort of fruit or vegetable, any sort of food in general that's normally dipped into a liquid, and practically nowadays anything that's wet, for example, if you would eat a wet apple or something like that, you just wash it, you're going to eat it while it's wet. So first we wash our hands as if we were washing for bread, twice on the right hand, twice on the left. The idea is we want to purify ourselves because any sort of spiritual impurity that might reside on our hands can be transferred through that liquid like a conduit and infect the food we're going to eat with that impurity as well. So since we're going to be eating this wet food, we first wash our hands. There's no blessing that was instituted on this washing, but we do it anyway. And this is the first example that we see maybe of us acting like elevated spiritual royal beings, that we're sitting down. I saw a nice custom that if possible, you know, you don't make your family crazy, but I've seen families that bring the cup of water to the head of the household while he sits there like a king, and maybe even they wash his hands for him. All of this is meant to embellish the whole situation and treat us like royalty and purify ourselves for what's coming. Okay.
Excellent. Rabbi Wogelarter.
Okay, so after we wash our hands, without making a blessing, as Rabbi Busko mentioned, by the way, that's a beautiful custom to have the hands washed at the table, to have it brought either to the leader or around to the whole table. It's very beautiful, and that's part of the experience. This is an experiential Judaism. We are experiencing it. We're going to experience freedom. Take one step backwards. There's another beautiful custom when you pour for the cups of wine. When you pour the cups of wine, there's a beautiful custom that no one pours for themselves. Because do you know any king, any truly free person back in the day that would pour a cup of wine for themselves? Of course not. Someone else would be pouring it for them. So there's a beautiful custom that you turn to the person next to you and you pour for them their cup of wine. Maybe you wash the hands of the head of the household at the table. This is part of the experience of freedom. But then, in the third step of the 15, in Karpas, it all comes crashing down. Because what do? We take a vegetable, and as these great free men who just washed their hands at the table, had someone come and serve them, we dip it into the salt water. We take our vegetable, depending on your family's custom. My family happens to use celery. We take that vegetable, and we dip it into salt water. And our whole charade comes crashing down. And we are thrust immediately into Egypt, back into Egypt. And what's the idea? Rabbi Yaakov, I don't want you to be muted. No, I want it to be out loud. What's the idea? What's the idea? Why are we doing that? I thought we're free men. It's the night of the Seder. What's going on here? So what are we doing? It is true. Eventually, by the end, we will achieve that freedom. And we just tasted it ever so slightly. Someone poured our cup of wine. Someone washed our hands. Maybe we didn't even have to get up to wash our hands. It's all true. But that's what we're going to get. That's where we're going to get. We're sort of setting the stage. But now we have to take a few steps back. And we dip that vegetable inside of the salt water. And we remember the pain and the exile of Egypt. And use the time when we remember these things. Don't just say, I guess the idea is how to lead a Seder, how to get something from the Seder. Don't just say, we dip the vegetable in the salt water to remember the tears. Turn to the people at your Seder. Or think for yourself if you're there. Think inside of your head, what was so painful about Egypt? Talk it out, speak it, express it. The tools that are being given here at the Seder, the tools that the rabbis set up as the framework for the Seder are there to make you converse, make you talk about it. Talk about the pain in Egypt. Talk about why it was so painful to be a Jew in Egypt. And that's why we dip it in the salt water, to get us to start to experience that, to start to talk about that. But what are we dipping? Very interestingly enough, it's a spring, a leafy vegetable, something that would sprout from the ground. Some people are from a part of the world where they didn't have that kind of thing, so they took the next best thing. They took a potato, right? It was easy to find. That's where their families are from. Maybe from Russia or some part of the world, Eastern Europe. What kind of green vegetables did they have? I know my father always jokes at the Seder. In his house, potato was called a vegetable, so it made sense, right? You take a potato. But you take a leafy springtime vegetable. And so what are the rabbis telling us? What is this custom? What is this stage of Karpas? Yes, it's true. You dip it into the salt water. It was painful. But always remember, what goes inside of you? What are you keeping with you? That springtime, the fact that there is a future. There is that little bud coming out of the tree now at the time when Pesach is, the time of spring, right? The weather just changed. Most of us are in Houston. The weather just changed. It's hot outside already, right? We can start to feel the rebirth. And so what the rabbis are doing, what they're weaving into the haggadah is, yes, there's pain in the salt water. There was pain in Egypt. But remember what stays with you. What are you putting in your mouth? You're putting in your mouth the idea that there is a brighter future. There is a springtime, and it's coming. It's coming through the Seder. Okay. We eat the karpas. And because of these two lessons within the karpas, there are differences of opinion about whether or not you lean. My family does not lean when they eat the karpas. to remember the bitter times in Egypt. That's what we're really focused on at this stage in the Haggadah, is the bitterness. Leaning, I don't know if we talked about it yet tonight. When we drink that first cup of wine is our first experience where we lean to the left. Did you see? This is great. I love Zoom. You lean to the left as they used to do. They used to lie, enjoy, relax, freedom. And we start experiencing. So we drink that first cup of wine leaning. The karpas, on the other hand, when we eat the karpas, this vegetable, we do not lean. We remember we're about to experience the exile. We are going to go as an entire group at the Seder. We're going to go into the exile. I hand it back to you.
Thank you so much. So the next part of the Seder is yachatz. Yachatz means like chetzi, which means half. And that what we're going to do is we're going to take a matzah. This is a hand-baked matzah. And what we do is...
Don't do it! Don't do it! Don't do it!
We split the matzah in half. And then we take the smaller one and we'll put it back into our pile of 3 matzahs. And the larger one, I believe this one in my left hand is the larger one. This one, we will, as Rabbi Mogelanter said so beautifully, part of it is now and part of it is the future. There's a little bit of suspense that we're trying to create in our children's interest in the Seder, number one, but also to understand that the original exile that we had in Egypt is very closely linked with the final exile, which is the one we're in today. So we take one and we put it away for the later exile, which is the one we're experiencing today in our days, and that we're going to hopefully have at the end of the Seder, which is the afikoman. At this point, what we do is we take the larger one and we hide it. And we put it some hiding place. And the idea is also, it's a long night. We're trying to keep the children engaged. We want the children to have an exciting element to this whole long evening. And they look for the afikoman. They look for this hidden matzah. And my father always used to make an agreement with us that if he gets it back in more than 4 pieces, it's worthless. So don't smash it up and don't fight and have wrestling matches over who's got it. And usually you have to pay a handsome ransom to get it back. So, and that's one of the things that my children love about the Seder, is that they're able to look for the afikoman and that they're able to find it and hopefully negotiate a good deal to get it back in return. And we'll get back to the afikoman later on at the end of the Seder. So now we're going to continue with Magid, which is the largest portion of the Seder, where we actually tell the story. And we'll start with Rabbi Yaakov Cohen, who will start with the halach ma'anya.
Okay, so halach ma'anya, we say this is the bread of affliction, which our forefathers ate in the land of Egypt. Of course, there's many messages that matzah gives over. You know, sometimes it's the bread of slavery, and yet it's the bread that we ate when we left Egypt because we had to leave so quickly. I'm going to give over something very quickly because it's very deep, and it has to do with our 15-step process of emunah. And in terms of when we break this bread, we have it whole, as Rabbi Wolbe showed you, and then we broke it and put it in half. That is the bread of affliction, is this brokenness, is that the mentality of the poor man, he puts some away for later. Now, there's 2 modes of thinking. There's 2 attitudes and 2 ways that we approach our relationship with God. One is as a son or a daughter, and the other is as a servant, okay? This is from the Bardichba Rebbe. If you look in the Kedushas Halevi, Rabbi Wogelanter, it's an unbelievable piece there, okay? That really, there's a way that we understand how God behaves with us, and really, we set the pace for the relationship. Do you live it like a son or a daughter, or do you live it like something less than a son or a daughter? There is whole mind thinking, like a whole matzah. There's broken, okay? So broken, the poor man, he's got to put, that is not whole-minded thinking. The whole-minded thinking is to live it like a son, to make the will of God, that he is our Father and he loves to give us. And everybody has to hook inside themselves with the reality that when their son or daughter approaches them and they want something, they love to give them. There's an innate ability to want to give your children. That is there. Do we behave like that with God? That is called whole-minded thinking. Do we, when we pray to God, when we approach God, do we have that wholeness of mind that God loves and he wants to give us? Or do we think that, oh, maybe yes or maybe no? That's called poor-minded thinking, okay? Halach ma'anya is to remember that in Egypt, we were broken. Does Hashem want? Does he not want? Is he like this? Is he like this? And the object is to get it into a whole state of being where we live it like a son, okay? Where we approach God that God loves to give us. That is, once again, trying to initiate what it was in Egypt by a broken style thinking as opposed to a whole style thinking. I return it to you, Rabbi Wolf.
Excellent. Rabbi Chaim Busko, it's all yours. Manishtana.
Now we move on to the Manishtana. This is maybe the most famous part of the night because it's when the kids get excited and it's their time to shine. And this is what it's all leading up for. This is what we've been doing strange things up until now. And it's been for the sake of engaging the children, getting them to actively ask questions and participate, because the whole point of this is to instill the emunah, yes, in ourselves and also onto them and their future generations. Now, as Rabbi Wogelanter said earlier, this year, a lot of people might not have children. Maybe you're alone, like completely alone, just by yourself. So you should probably just skip the questions, right? Why bother asking questions to yourself and then answering them? It's a bit silly. But the sages say that's not the case. The sages say that even if you're by yourself, and even if you're a wise man, that you've studied Torah your whole life, you're the biggest rabbi in the world, you're sitting by yourself, you ask yourself these questions. And they're simple questions. It's not like, and there's not like a great answer that's given either. There's not even a clear answer. It's basically, what are the 4 questions? Number 1, all year round, we can eat matzah, we can eat haaretz, we eat everything we like. Just tonight we're eating matzah. Strange. Why are we doing that? Usually we eat all kinds of vegetables. Tonight we're eating maror. I don't like horseradish. It's gross. Personally, I don't like it. So why are we eating maror? Why are you dipping your food twice into the liquid? Usually we dip once. That was a custom then. And normally, if you want to sit up while you eat, that's fine. If you want to lie down like you're all regal, you could do that. But tonight, everyone's a king, right? So we do these things that are strange. They're out of the ordinary. And it's just for the sake of piquing the interest of the children. And yet, every single person needs to ask themselves these questions, even if you're alone, even if you're a wise person. And the idea is, as we've been saying before, we're not doing deep, deep things here in terms of complexity. We're instilling the most basic, fundamental emunah within ourselves. And that requires a constant refresher. Every year, even if you know lots and lots of things, you need to reestablish your context for your whole life. What is the point of all of this? Why are we doing things differently? I need to remember, oh yeah, I was a slave in Egypt. God brought me out. There's a purpose for my existence. We have a mission in this world, and that's our emunah. Is there anything else I wanted to say about that? I think that'll cover it for now.
Perfect. So now we come to answer the questions. Avadim hayinu. We were slaves to Paro and Mitzrayim. If you're leading a Seder with children, by the way, what is the Haggadah telling you? This would be a great time to start telling the story of the Exodus of Egypt, and start it with Avadim hayinu, right? I was actually at a Seder, and it was some very professional Jews at this Seder. And I felt like we got almost all the way till the end of the Haggadah, and I had not yet heard the story of the Exodus of Egypt. I had not yet heard anyone be in wonder and be amazed at the story of Avadim hayinu leparo b'Mitzrayim. Well, guess what the author of the Haggadah is telling us? Guess what the rabbis are telling us right here? Your kids are engaged. They just stood up on the chair. You've just asked some very good questions. Start talking about it, because it's through talking about it that we can unlock this special power that we have tonight to connect straight to faith and trust in Hashem. And so we talk about Avadim hayinu leparo b'Mitzrayim. And lest one say, but Rabbi, I have like all these paragraphs that I still have to say. How could I start talking about the Exodus here? If you look, you're only on page 3 of Magid, and you got a bunch more to go. How could I start? Why would this be an appropriate place? Well, guess what this paragraph ends off with? Kol hamar b'lesaper b'yetzias Mitzrayim harei zeh meshubach. The more you speak about the Exodus of Egypt, the more praiseworthy you are. And use the words of the Haggadah as a springboard for conversation. These are keys, these are clues telling you how to achieve, how to understand what the Jews went through, how to use that as a tool and a method for breaking free of your own personal shackles and how to achieve true freedom. And I believe that the next thing we're going to do is the 4 sons, but they're in the paragraphs that follow immediately after Avadim Hayinu. It's also setting this tone for us to say, you can be as religious as you want. It don't matter. Guess what tonight is? Tonight is go back to the basics. Tell the story. Be amazed at the story. Just be amazed at the miracles. We say God brought 10 plagues. We're going to talk about that, right? Be amazed at it. Talk about it. Describe each plague. Describe what was going on. Describe what was going on to the Jews while they were slaves. Describe what went on for them as they left Egypt. Be amazed at it. Bring that wonder to your table if you're leading for others, and bring that wonder within you to the child inside. Hand it back.
Thank you so much. The next part of the Seder is when we talk about the 4 sons. And it's a beautiful, if you think about it, this whole concept of the Seder is all about education. It's education of understanding for ourselves what we experience, but also sharing it to our children, to our next generation. It's the mitzvah of the night, is the haggadah talabincha b'yomahu. We're supposed to reiterate these words every single year, go over it again and again and again. And one of the beautiful ideas that Rabbi Wogeler touched on is that there's a mitzvah to talk about and elaborate on the Exodus from Egypt. There's a mitzvah to elaborate. The more you can talk about, the better off you'll be. Why? Because you'll see how much God loves you. The more details we're able to get into, the more we see that love, the more we feel that connection, the more we see like, wow, this is unbelievable. Not to rush through it, to get and to find a way, a creative way to get our children involved. But we all know that every child is different. And that's what the Haggadah is going to next, is that it's very good if you have a child who's, intelligent, a child who's motivated to learn. But what's if you have a child who's not motivated to learn? What's if you have a child who doesn't know how to ask those questions, who is not intuitive, who doesn't see any contradictions or complications? It's like, whatever. And that's the uniqueness of the Seder, is we recognize that every single Jew is a blessing. Every single Jew has something special that they can offer. And it's a very interesting thing my grandfather would point out every year when I was at the Seder, at his Seder. He would say that if you look at She'eni Yodea Lo Sha'ol, particularly the last of the 4 sons, who doesn't know how to ask, so it says, At Ptach Lo. It's in a feminine term. It's saying she should open up his questioning. She should pique his interest. My grandfather would say that's the uniqueness of a mother. A mother is able to understand the special uniqueness of her child and able to touch pique the interest of the child. And what we're trying to do is, like was mentioned previously, we're all children of Hashem. And we have to recognize, we might not be the scholar. Yes, we might not be the learned one who knows all of the Talmudic sources and the Midrashic sources. That's fine. What does Egypt mean to you? What is this limitation that we had? And they say that the great Rabbi Chaskell Levenstein, who was known to be a beacon of emunah, of faith, he would actually walk around the Seder table with a heavy sack of potatoes over his back, to feel and to experience what it meant to be a slave. What did it mean? And all of his children, they'd all walk around with sacks over their back that they had to schlep, and they had to actually experience it, not just in theory, but in actual practice, to try to feel what it means. That's because some children, you can talk to them intellectually, and some children, they need to actually physically experience it. And that's the uniqueness of the Seder, is that we don't just say one size fits all. Judaism is not about one size fits all. It's finding the uniqueness of each one. How do we relate the story to each individual so that everybody feels like this is their exodus? It's not just for the learned ones, for the scholars, for the rabbis, it's for them. But for me, I'm just a simple guy. Leave me alone, give me the food, right? Everyone can find a way to connect to the Seder, and that's what we're trying to do now. I'm going to turn the floor to Rabbi Cohn, who's going to talk about Vihisha Amda.
I mean, this is a really dynamic part of the entire telling of the story, because, here actually the instructions, if you follow through the instructions, you got to sometimes read between the lines. It says you cover the matzahs that were exposed, because you're showing everybody matzahs, slave food. And now you have to lift the cup, okay? You have to lift the cup, and then you say Vihisha Amda. Vihisha Amda means, basically, if I would translate it literally, and she stood for our forefathers and for us. Shelo echad bilavad amad aleinu lekaloseinu. There's a song, right? For not only one enemy has risen against us to annihilate us, but in every generation men rise against us. But the Holy One, blessed be He, saves us from their hand. Now, Vihisha Amda is a whole issue here, but they loosely translated here as the promise to Abraham. When in the bris, in the covenant between the halves that was done, that Abraham was told that your children are going to go in an exile and I'm going to bring them back. So the idea here is loosely understood as the promise has stood for us, okay? But we have to raise the cup and we have to say this, because this deepens our emunah even more, especially now after 2,000 years of exile, okay? That through every single thing that now we can look back and know that what we have been through, we can say it within a much more deeper way, that here, even though they tried to annihilate us in every single generation, and they rise up constantly to knock us out, we are still here. We will always be doing what we're doing, because what? God is preserving us. That is something that we really need to integrate very deeply into us, to know that the Shekhinah, that's really another idea of what Vihisha Amda is, the holy divine presence, the spiritual collective consciousness of the Jewish people in terms of our goal, our life's goal. We will always stand. We will always be able to go forward. Samuel Clemens, I believe he's wrote, the author of Mark Twain. How did he see God? He finally came to the belief in God because what? He's not Jewish. He saw how the Jewish people are still around. He said, these guys, they shouldn't be around. They're still around. Therefore, he said, there is a God. And for us, all the more so. I'll turn it back over to you, Rabbi Wolbe.
We're going to have Rabbi Yaakov Wolbe share with us a little project.
Sorry, I'm not dressed for the occasion. I'm in my kitchen getting ready for Pesach. But I was listening in, and I just thought of something really interesting I wanted to share. Like Rabbi Wolbe said, one of the highlights of the Seder is the four sons. And I always felt a certain kinship for the wicked son. The wicked son, we were trained that there's also no such thing as a bad kid. And yet there's one kid that's labeled as a bad kid. And it seems like he's being castigated and pushed aside and marginalized. And if you read it simply, it says you have to hit his teeth out. And I was always taught that, no, you have to be nice and pleasant to the kids. And that's why we always try to find different explanations as to what exactly is the message with this wicked son. So I was just looking at the haggadah as my brother was speaking, and right after it delineates the four sons, it goes to the history of the Jewish people. And it says that originally our forefathers were idol worshipers. And which forefathers are they talking about? I always thought that our forefathers are Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Which one of them were the guilty party? Well, it turns out that it's none of the above. It's not Abraham, not Isaac, not Jacob. It's Terach. Who's Terach? Terach is not one of our forefathers. So Terach is the father of Abraham, and he was a very famous idol worshiper. And therefore, it's important for us to keep in mind on this night that we don't come from the best stock. We don't come from the choicest pedigree. But I was thinking maybe this is connecting to the wicked son. If you have a son that's a wicked child, and the Torah labels him as wicked, you may have an instinct to give up on him. And on Pesach, we say, no, there has to be a message for the righteous, for the wise son, for the for the wicked son, for all kinds of sons. They're all important. And you know how important the wicked son is? You should know there was once a really wicked man. His name was Terach. And he was an idol worshiper. He was a sinner. He was a purveyor and a patron of the idols. He was like one of the most famous idol worshippers in town. And you know what became of him? The Jewish people. Father of Abraham, grandfather of Isaac, great-grandfather of Jacob. And he's our forefather. So if he can have this great legacy, your son, he may be wicked, path to reach out on Pesach. We can't give up on him because who knows what's going to be from your wicked son. Who knows what kind of amazing legacy he's going to be able to build, provided that you push the right buttons and you tailor and craft your message. Maybe he will be the father of the next Abraham, the next Isaac, and the next Jacob. That was just the thought that I had. And
thank you so much, Rabbi Yaakov. We look forward to seeing you in the continuation of this program. Rabbi Chaim Busko, the floor is turned to you about the 10 plagues.
At this point in the Haggadah, we start to unfold the drama. The intense suffering of the Jewish people that took place, and then they cried out to Hashem. Hashem heard their suffering, saw their anguish, and then started bringing about these plagues, which are destruction of Egypt. The intellectual benefit, what was a very powerful message once upon a time from these 10 plagues, is not as powerful for us in this generation. Meaning, in a time where people had a very deep connection to spirituality, there was a very intense drive to serve idolatry. What's idolatry? It was foolishness. It was just nonsense. There is a reality that there are energies that are channeled through different layers of the worlds that reality is built with, and it's real. There are these different channels, and if one were sensitive enough, if one were educated enough about how the system works, they could attune themselves to one of these channels and maybe even communicate with it, have a relationship with it. It's possible. This is what idolatry was, meaning there was some sort of power that governed over the moon and Mars and things like that, and that would affect events in our daily life. This is something that's so foreign to us in our generation, in the Western world especially, that atheism is a much more common draw than this sort of anti-spirituality. But there are these channels, but what a Jew needs to know, what the purpose of these plagues was to show that every idolater knew that there was an infinite creator of the world. Yud Kei Vav Kei, okay, it's a thing. There is an infinite creator. But what does it have to do with me? I can't get anything from the infinite creator. If you go to the bank and you want to make a withdrawal of $60, you don't blow past the teller and go knock on the CEO's door of the bank. That's not what he's for. You have nothing to do with the CEO. You go to the bank teller. What God was demonstrating was that not only did he happen to create the world, but he is intimately involved in the world. And he demonstrated that by showing his complete reign over every aspect of reality that we see here in this world, starting from the ground up, from the waters that go beneath the earth, coming up from the frogs that come out from the water, the lice that come out from the ground, and the animals that live on top of the ground, moving up and up with the locusts and even light itself, until finally the power over life and death, each one establishing God's complete control over every aspect of reality to show that not only did he create it and he has that ultimate power, but he's interested in what's happening in this world. Now, like I said, that message doesn't mean a lot to us anymore because that's not really our struggle. I don't really struggle with the idea is Hashem in control of the rain, or is there some sort of other deity that's in control of the rain? My problem is I don't think about that, right? So therefore, I suggest that we not focus on that aspect of what these plagues are for, although it's important to know intellectually, it's a fundamental of our emunah, of our faith, to know this idea. What's most beneficial for us, I think, is to, as I said before, leading up until the 10 plagues, this unfolding of the drama, if we can really get in character. As Rabbi Wolbe mentioned, Rabbi Yaakov Vogelanter said, that we need to experience it. Each person needs to imagine himself as if they are leaving Egypt And let's do it literally. I wholly recommend this. Let's role play. And if that seems too silly for you to do it actively, at least take some time during the Seder to just close your eyes, really imagine what it would be like to be in the sprawling metropolis of Cairo, or these massive cities in ancient Egypt, and hear the sounds and smell the smells of the marketplace. Imagine feeling yourself there and experiencing these plagues happening, watching it happen to the non-Jews around you, and the feeling of intense joy of salvation of what's happening to the Jewish people, and a complete overturn of the entire world. That's what's going to, I think, speak to us much more than the intellectual understanding of what each plague was supposed to do. But each person to himself, this is my recommendation. I think that experiential imagination, the Yetzer Hara uses a lot of strength in the imagination to get us to fantasize about things which are improper for a good Jew. It's a good idea to use that same power against him. Use our power of imagination to fantasize about what it would have been like to live in Egypt at that time and experience these 10 plagues. Okay, I'll turn it over.
Thank you so much. You know, being a young man sitting by my grandfather's Seder was really an incredible experience. And my grandfather every year repeated the same idea when we said Dayenu. Now, Dayenu for many is a great song. Many people sing Day, Dayenu, Day, Dayenu, Day, Dayenu, 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 right? And I always sang that song and loved that song. And my grandfather would ask a question every single time. He said, look, what we're doing is when we sing the song of Dayenu is like, you know what, if God only took us out of Egypt, but didn't give the Egyptians so many plagues, that would have been enough. If God wouldn't have hurt their firstborn, that would have been enough. If God didn't give us the money, that would have been enough. If God didn't split the sea for us, that would be enough. And so we go on each of these. It's sort of like when you're trying to shower praise over someone. So you say, you know what? It was so nice that you called me. It was so nice that you came and visited me. It was so nice. Like each step you're acknowledging and you're appreciating. And it's like, it's also first, but just about as a side note, it's a nice way for a person to appreciate and show thanks, you know, to a spouse, right? Your spouse prepares a dinner or prepares, right? You know what? It's enough that you had the first course, but then you have the second course, and then you have the main course, and it's like all of these things, and you go and to explain each step of it shows appreciation on a very great level. But one of them doesn't make any sense, and that is Ilu Kirvanu L'Fnei Sinai, V'lo Nasalonu Torah Dayenu. If God had only brought us to Mount Sinai, but didn't bring us to give us the Torah, Dayenu, that would be enough. And my grandfather would say this every single year. He said, what do people pay money for? Today you have these hydro flasks, right? So what's the hydro flask? The idea is that it keeps your water cold or hot for an extended period of time, right? So you can put in hot water or coffee in the morning, and that coffee will stay hot till 4, 5, 6 o'clock in the afternoon. Now, what would happen if they created a thermos or one of those hydro flasks that kept the water hot for 10 years? Right, that would be like, wow, that'd be so expensive. Can you imagine that it could keep that water hot just like it was, you know, at 7 o'clock at January 1st, 2020, all the way till, you know, January 1st, 2030. For 10 years, it would keep it steaming hot. That would be an unbelievable thing, right? My grandfather said that the purpose of going to Mount Sinai was not to receive the Torah. Contrary to what people believe. People think we went to Mount Sinai to receive the Torah. I thought that for many years. My grandfather corrected that idea. That's not why we went to Mount Sinai. We went to Mount Sinai to build a relationship with God. No girl gets engaged to get a ring. She gets engaged to get a commitment in a relationship with her fiancé. The ring represents that relationship. The Torah represents the relationship that we established with God at Mount Sinai. The purpose of going to Mount Sinai was not to receive the Torah. It was to receive the relationship with God. So now, 3,300 years later, we are sitting in Houston, Texas, all around the world, and we're talking about what? About that relationship and how we can build that relationship with God. And the goal of the entire Seder is to build that relationship. And what we're trying to say is that no matter if we receive that Torah at Mount Sinai or not, right? It's about the relationship. But just to put it into context, so like if you took your children to the ice cream store, and then you just say, okay, now let's leave, and the kids are like, what's with the ice cream, right? What's with the we don't go to the ice cream store not to get ice cream. Well, we went to Mount Sinai not to get the Torah. We went to Mount Sinai to get the relationship. The Torah is 613 souvenirs that come along with the Torah to recreate that relationship. Every time we pass that mezuzah, it's an opportunity for us to open that relationship again. Every time we wear tzitzit, it's an opportunity for us to open that relationship again and to relive it. And the same thing with tefillin, the same thing with Shabbos. Each mitzvah, right? God wanted to give us so many opportunities for that connection. Therefore, he gave us so many different vehicles through which we can make that bond eternal. So I'm going to turn it now to Rabbi Yaakov Vogelernter, who's going to talk about the Pesach, matzah, and mar, and the second cup.
Okay, so if the Maggid section, which we're in, if the Maggid section is the main focus of the haggadah, it's where all the meat is, right? Well, not a lot of eating meat, but it's where all the discussion takes place is right here during Maggid. And then we get towards the end of Maggid, which is where we are right now, and we just sang Dayenu, as so beautifully explained. Thank you, Hashem, for everything that you've done for us, both as a nation and personally. We sang Dayenu. We started saying the praises. We said how much more so we would have to thank Hashem for all the things that he actually did for us. So beautiful. We're at the high point. We're about to make the blessing that at the end of Maggid, which we'll talk about in a moment, we're about to take the second cup. We're about to say thank you, Hashem, for everything that you did for our forefathers in Egypt. And now we stick in a little Talmudic dictum. Rabbi Gamliel said, whoever doesn't say the following three things has not fulfilled his obligation of Maggid. You got to say these three things. You got to say Pesach, matzah, and maror. You got to mention the Paschal lamb. You got to mention the matzah, and you got to mention the maror. And it always bothered me. Why in the world, at this high point of Maggid, you know, we got some details out of the way at the beginning. We made Kiddush, and as significant as it is, in the end of the day, it's a holiday. This is a Jewish holiday. It's the beginning of Passover. We always make Kiddush, right? We started off with maybe some hors d'oeuvres with karpas. We did some stuff at the beginning. We got through some technical details more towards the beginning of Maggid. If you go through the whole text fully, you get through some technical details. And here we're at the high point. We just sang Dayenu. For many families, this is when everyone's back at the table. We sing Dayenu together, and then, says the author of the Haggadah, stop. You got to mention three things before it gets too late. You got to say Pesach, matzah, maror. You know, you got to get these things in there. We say it, and guess what we go right back to? We go right back to singing. We go right back to praising God. We go right back to the beginning paragraphs of Hallel. If you have a Haggadah in front of you, this question should jump out at you. What is Rabbi Gamliel's statement that you need to mention? Pesach, matzah, maror. What is it doing at this high point of Maggid? And I think I started developing an idea, and I'll continue developing it here with you. You'll let me know if you agree. You could comment or let me know. I believe that we are about to embark on the next stage of the Haggadah, which is the experiential stage, which is when we actually take these symbols of slavery, symbols of freedom, we take them and we ingest them. We make them a part of ourselves. We take the lessons that we've learned, the ideas we've developed with the participants at our Seder. We take those things and we put them inside of us. We allow them to become one with our body. most connected we could become with these ideas. We ingest them. We eat the matzah. We're about to eat the maror. We're going to eat a combination, a sandwich of matzah and maror. And before we do that, says Rabbi Gamliel, right here you have to understand that to experience and to munch on some matzah is a beautiful thing. To lean is a beautiful thing. To have someone pour your cup of wine, these are all beautiful things. But don't forget the meaning. Don't forget the meaning. This again, I see this as a springboard for understanding the entire evening, which is don't get bogged down by, don't think that the point is to stuff your face with matzah and move on. No, says Rabbi Gamliel, you gotta know why we're eating matzah. You have to talk about why we're eating matzah. Before you eat it, before you get to the stage of eating it, have that discussion. What are we about to do when we eat matzah? Says Rabbi Gamliel, before you actually, it's true, the entire night of the Seder is about experiences. It's about reliving it. It's about role-playing here at the table with our families, with ourselves, with our participants. It's all about the experience. But says Rabbi Gamliel, you have to make sure that you have the proper kavanah. Make sure that you have the proper intention. Understand what is it? Why is it? Discuss, digest, talk about why it is. Says Rabbi Gamliel, matzah in one line. Do you know that matzah, now I go into explaining now some idea that you can have. If you look at the paragraphs, so we can continue moving, you have to do this as homework. But if you look at Rabbi Gamliel's paragraphs, look at his paragraph on matzah and try to get an idea that you can actually think about while you're eating matzah. Look at his paragraph on maror and try to get an idea that you can actually think about while you're eating maror. But moving it along, we then go into the final praises of this section of the Haggadah, where we sing the specific parts of Hallel that have to do with the exodus of Egypt. We say, thank you, Hashem, for everything that you did for us in the past. We've reached a point, and if you haven't, go back. Talk about it more. Don't move on. You have to reach a point where you can say, thank you to Hashem for what you did. We lift the cup at the end of Magid and we make the blessing, the text of the blessing. You're going to have to see it as homework. The most beautiful blessing. Thank you, Hashem, for everything that you did. May it be your will, Hashem, that we should experience this in the future, that we should experience this on a personal level, and that we should get to a place. Blessed are you, Hashem, who has redeemed Israel. This is what I firmly believe in. By the end of Magid, I could say, blessed are you, God, who is the redeemer of the Jewish people. We make a blessing of Borei, Peri, Hagafen, because it's been a while since we had that first cup. We lean again as a sign of freedom, and we drink our second cup of wine. And we move on to Rachza.
Thank you. Rabbi Cohen, it's all yours.
We finally got to the place now, everybody, where we're going to wash for bread. We finally get to eat, right? People who've never been to a Passover Seder, I always tell them, eat before because, what happens, and I always tell them, but what happens? They always come starving, right? So here's the place where, of course, before we eat bread, as is custom, anytime we eat bread and matzah included, we have to do what's called netilas yadayim. We wash our hands, right? It's great that I'm doing it because really, actually, washing hands was instituted by King Solomon and his court. It is a rabbinic commandment from way, way, way back. And one of the reasons that it is brought down to wash hands is because really, people didn't have to do it and they weren't doing it, but the Kohanim, the priests, me and my descendants, for our special consecrated food, we would always have to wash hands. So if we would be at a party where there's some people washing and then we are like only few of us and we're not, we wouldn't eat or we wouldn't even wash hands. It could come to where we would not wash hands for consecrated food. So King Solomon and his court says, okay, blanket, everybody, for bread, wash his hands. Now, we see a lot of benefits over the thousands of years, right? We got saved from bubonic plague and a lot of things. But in any case, just to get practical purposes, we always wash our hands before bread. We fill the cup with water, pick it up with our left hand. We put the cup in our right hand. We pour 1, 2, and if you come from other customs, we'll do 3, but usually I was taught 1, 2 on one hand, put the cup in this hand and 1, 2 on the other. And then we say a blessing that is in your haggadah. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, asher kedishanu v'zosav v'tzivanu al netilas yadayim. And then we sit down and we're quiet. We sit down at the table, try not to have too much conversation, and wait for the guy to wash and break for the matzah. Back to you, Rabbi.
Okay, now's the time to stuff your face with matzah. Believe me, you're going to stuff your face with a lot of matzah. There's been a lot of ideas like, wow, amazing kind of stuff. This is going to be a lot more practical. If you're following the instructions of the haggadah, it's going to seem a little bit complicated and confusing. I'm going to give you some technical details to understand why you're doing what you're doing. I think it'll just help to have some sort of understanding of what that is. So this is one of the mitzvahs of the night. It's ideal to have in mind that you're fulfilling a beautiful mitzvah, and when you eat that matzah, just lean back and enjoy it. You're getting a kiss from Hashem. So how do you do it? You're going to take 3 matzahs. So back when we did haaretz, when we broke the matzah and you put that this back together with the other matzahs, that's going to be in the middle, and you'll have 2 complete matzahs, one on the top and one on the bottom, the smaller half of the broken one sandwiched right in the middle. You're going to hold all 3 of those. Why do you have 3 matzahs? On every Shabbat and every Yom Tov, we have what's called lefm mishnah, doubled bread. This is a remembrance of the manna that fell during the times in the desert. And so therefore we want full pieces of bread. Usually it's bread, now it's matzah. So you want to have 2 complete pieces of matzah. That's the top and the bottom. And we put that broken part in the middle because we want to have what's called lechem oni, which means the bread of affliction. We want to have, because it's broken and it's small. So we want both of these things in there. You're going to make 2 different blessings. One is the standard blessing on all bread, and matzah is a form of bread. So you're going to make hamotzi lechem min haaretz. That's going to be the first blessing. The most common one comes first. The second one is a specific mitzvah to eat the matzah. So asher kedishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al achilat matzah. It is a dispute among earlier rabbis which blessing goes on which bread. Meaning we have these 2 complete breads and the lechem oni, the bread of affliction, the broken one in the middle. Which one is the hamotzi going on and which one is the mitzvah of eating matzah going on? That's a dispute, and therefore we're stringent for both opinions. So what's going to happen is like this. You pick them all up. For when you make the original blessing of hamotzi lechem min haaretz, you want to have that doubled bread, that lechem mishnah, with both complete matzahs together. After you make that blessing, you don't need it anymore. You can drop the bottom matzah. That's why you do that. Okay, so now you're holding both the top matzah and the broken one for the second blessing of al achilat matzah. Because again, we don't know which one the blessing is supposed to be going on, so we hold them both. After you make that second blessing, then you want to eat from both of them at the same time, that top one and the bottom one. You don't have to swallow them at the same time, but crack it and take a bite, put both of those 2 matzahs from the top and that broken middle one, put them both in your mouth at the same time, and you want to eat 2 kazesim. Now what's a kazayas? What's kazesim? This is a volume of bread, of food, and less than a kazayas, less than this volume, is not considered eating anything. And so therefore, when you make this blessing, you need to eat a complete kazayas, I'll tell you how much that is in 1 second, from both the top and the middle one, because again, we don't know which one is supposed to be for which. This is a lot of matzah, because it goes based on volume and not density. When you have big fluffy bread, it's really not that much at all. It's like a small roll or something like that, and even less. But when it comes to matzah, matzah is very dense, very thin. So therefore, to get the entire volume of a kazayas, you need to eat a lot. And this might cause some stomach aches. You're not obligated to hurt yourself. Be lenient if you absolutely need to, if it's a health risk. But otherwise, try to push it, be stringent. How much is it? I assume most people listening here are going to be eating the machine matzahs. If that's the case, I know this is a shocker, but 1 kazayas is about 2/3 of a whole matzah. So that means when you make this blessing, when you make these two blessings, you're going to want to eat from the top one and the middle one. There probably won't even be enough. You want to eat 2/3 of each matzah before you start even speaking, right? And you're going to do this as you're leaning back. Now, just one quick idea while you're doing this is what's fascinating is that in a second, I think Rabbi Yaakov is going to tell you about the maror. When you eat the maror, you don't be antithetical. The maror is supposed to remind you of the bitterness. It's not about regality, not about kingship and feeling noble. And yet for matzah, we are leaning back, even though we're eating something called lechem oni, the bread of our affliction. So that's a bit funny. So what's going on there? And this is a very, very powerful idea. Our sages say that when we were in Egypt, when we were slaves the whole time, you know what we ate? Matzah. It was fast, it was cheap, it was easy. They fed it to us because it kept us nourished, and it was the bare minimum we could possibly eat. That's why it's the bread of our affliction, because that's what we ate the whole time we were in slavery in Egypt. And you know what the first meal we get when we're free? What do we get when we come out and the salvation comes? Matzah. Great, I never had it before. Can you imagine? But that's what we eat. And that's what we're eating now as we're reclining, as we're experiencing this salvation, this redemption out of Egypt. We're eating the exact same food, and we're supposed to understand that the objective situation that we're put in has nothing to do with our actual state of being a slave or being a free man. It's all about the mentality. When you're in a slave mentality, your matzah is bread of affliction. When you're in a mentality of freedom and your mind is free and you're serving God and your soul is unleashed, then that same matzah is a kiss from Hashem. And this is what we're going to do. Okay.
Okay, you eat the matzah and you move on to eating the maror. So here you just take a kizayis.
Remember to recline when you eat that matzah.
You eat that matzah, you recline. So beautifully explained, Bosco. And when you take the maror, you're taking a kizayis of maror. If you have grated horseradish, you can ask your local Orthodox rabbi how much you need. If you're eating romaine lettuce, you can also ask, but those are basically your two options for maror: grated horseradish root and romaine lettuce. Those are your two options. You take your maror, and it would be appropriate. You make the bracha, asher k'yishanu b'mitzotav v'tzivanu al achilat maror, on eating maror, and you eat the maror sitting straight up. And the maror is obviously signifies the bitterness of the exile that we experienced, but on a deeper level, it also is the bitterness of our own personal exile. And everyone asks your personal exile, things that you have freed yourself from, that you no longer do, things of your past. Why are you bringing them up here? Why are we mentioning this? Why are we keep rehashing what we went through in Egypt, right? Why do you keep talking about it? Can you guys move on already? Why do you keep talking about it? And there are many times you have to find this pattern, another piece of homework, where there are many times in the Haggadah when we go back to painful events in our history. We're going to talk a lot the night of the Seder about painful events. Why do we keep talking about that? And the rabbis explain that the lesson of the maror is that those bitter times are what makes you who you are. They're what makes you who you are as a Jew. The fact that you and your nation has in it what it takes to get through an Egypt experience, and has you personally, with your soul, you have built into you the tools necessary to be able to get through any exile. As long as there's that little bit of Jew burning inside of you, you have what it takes. And so when we eat the maror, of course we have in our minds the bitter exile that we experienced as a nation in Egypt, but we can also think about it as incorporating the things that I maybe used to do, or the things that I'm right now at the Seder in the process of letting go of, those things that I will never deny that they're a part of me. They're a part of what makes me who I am, but there are certain actions that I no longer do. You could have all those things in mind and more. Develop your own ideas. Develop your own ideas before you get to sitting there putting the maror into your mouth. Before you get there, develop the ideas so that while you're eating it, you can have a central kavanah, have a real focused idea of what exactly it is that you're doing.
Thank you, Rabbi Wolgan. So the next part of what we do at the Seder is what we call korech. Korech is like a sandwich. In my family, we call it the Hillel burger. And what we do is we have from the bottom matzah, we take that matzah, we give everyone a piece of that matzah, and then we have the maror, and then another piece of matzah. And the idea, and that this maror we eat leaning to our side. The reason, there are many, many reasons, and that's one of the things you have to see. Every rabbi you'll talk to will give you different reasons. I want to share with you one beautiful idea. So we talk about the affliction that we had there, and that when we eat the maror, mentioned previously by Rabbi Wolgan, so we don't lean to our side. But now when we have it as a burger, the Hillel burger, then we eat it leaning. And the idea is we're living now in great times. We have such an abundance of gifts from the Almighty. We have so much good going on, and we forget sometimes that there's a little maror because we're still in an exile, because we're without our temple being built. So even though we're in the comforts and we're leaning to our side, but we have this, to say the same affliction that we had then, we still have some of that now. And we're trying to integrate that into the way we think about our lives now. So now we're going to move on right after we have this korech, the Hillel burger, then we have the big feast of Pesach. And now we're quickly going to go for 2 minutes apiece. Rabbi Cohn will talk about what the ideas of something you can discuss at your Seder table when you have open discussion, when you're not following the haggadah, and then we'll go in order as well. So Rabbi Cohn.
I loved what that rabbi, I forgot that rabbi's name, Rabbi Wolf, who spoke at the Partners in Torah a few weeks ago. And he did bring down also what I said was that each person has to talk about their own story. Everybody has a story, and that story has to get passed down to the kids. And that is really something so deep that each person can, even if it's like you're not with kids, to tell over the story. And if you're with someone, you could go over the memories of everybody's journey, because we're all on a journey. I have my journey. Everybody has their journey. And more specifically, everybody has situations that they were in where it seemed like things were hopeless or things were down, and obviously things turned around. And the proof of that is by the fact that we're here now, right? We're all here now. Hashem got you this far through many ups and downs, okay? And if you haven't had any ups and downs, you can come to me and I'll share some with you. Ups and downs, we've all had them. And to talk about that at the table. Talk about your personal story. Talk about situations you're in where God brought you out of it, because, God's the source. He brings us out of everything. He got us this far. He's going to get us the rest of the way. That's always you have to focus on, okay? With that, I think that's a great thing, a hot object item to talk about at the table. Rabbi, back to you.
Thank you so much. Rabbi Busko.
Okay, so in terms of specific topics to discuss, I think that should be organic. It should be organic. It should be whatever a person's interested in and wants to talk about and is engaged in, as long as we remember the following thing. This whole time, people have been joking up until that's the 15 steps, right? If we want to continue to give that analogy, something they say in the 12-step program, they say often is, it works if you work it, right? The system works if you are actively engaged in it. And therefore, don't think that if you just mumble through it and go through the steps, and then it'll somehow change you automatically. And so therefore, what we've been trying to do this entire time is build our consciousness to be engaged in this sort of mentality, in this experience of the leaving Egypt and the building the Emunah. The last thing you want to do is when you get to the meal, say like, finally, we're done with all that reading and stuff. Now we can just eat. and then it's like nothing happened, and then you just talk about whatever, and it's like a normal night. That's the last thing you want to do, because you'll wipe away all of the work that you were just trying to accomplish. Try as hard as you can to remain focused. Keep your consciousness where you were trying to build it. Whatever comes up naturally in terms of specific points of discussion, that's great. But as long as you don't lose that fire that you've been building, stay on top, stay focused, stay engaged, and keep building that consciousness. That's it.
Thank you. Rabbi Yaakov Vogelner.
I agree wholeheartedly. This is one of the steps here. Shulchan Aruch. Just remember, it is only one of the steps, and we have much work yet to do the night of the Seder. So keep that in mind. I know that at my father's Seder, usually we get to Shulchan Aruch. When I would experience the Seder with him, it would probably be about, I don't know, 1:30 in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, when you sit down to your first food for the evening. But even though people are hungry, the talk was always focused around the concepts that we had worked on and discussed earlier in the haggadah. And that is really where, as the leader of the Seder, you need to focus the discussions. As a pointer, during Magid, when questions come up that may necessitate a longer conversation, and if you feel like they may break up the flow, God will send you the cues. He will tell you, that's not a question for right now. Let's discuss it during the meal, because it's a valid question, but it might be a little bit off topic. It might break up the flow of the Haggadah. You want to keep that flow going. So in leading a Seder, you can always say, and you can use this time during the meal to discuss questions that came up that you said, you know what, put a bookmark on that. Let's discuss that when we serve the soup. So create that mental note, serve the soup. There was a question, you had a question, what was your question? And get back to it, because it allows you the freedom to really, go wild in the topics that you were discussing, and allows you to discuss them over a hearty bowl of soup.
Thank you so much. Before I introduce the next idea, I want to just share that when we had Seder by my grandfather, I remember my grandfather rushed through the Haggadah very, very quickly, because there were a lot of little children. And then when we got to Shulchan Aruch, when we got to the meal, that's when we started to elaborate a lot on the different ideas of Haggadah. There were a few points where he stopped along the way during the Magid, because Magid could be very long, but he didn't want the children to all fall asleep. I'm going to turn the floor now to my dear brother Rabbi Yaakov to share an idea of what to discuss at Shulchan Aruch.
Hi, everyone. So just an idea of what we do by our Seder. Of course, we have small children, and a lot of the high-minded ideas are very appealing to us adults. But one of the things that we try really hard is to try to keep the kids engaged. And even in the halacha, it talks about giving the kids treats, giving them nuts, giving them candy. Trying to make all these little gimmicks to keep them engaged and involved and awake. So just some ideas that what we do every year. So a lot of enacting. I know someone mentioned we carry the bag. The 10 plagues are great props for enactment. Who could do charades? Play charades. See who could do the best job of enacting or guessing which one of the plagues are being portrayed. In fact, the verse says that part of the experience of the plagues is funny. It's kind of funny to see all these Egyptians who thought they ruled the world being tormented and toyed with by God. So it could be funny as well. One of the things that my wife does, or she's done over the years, is the headband game, where you put it on a headband, and in the headband you put one of the characters of the story. It could be one of the plagues, one of the people involved, and the person who was wearing the headband has to ask questions to try to figure out who they are or what they are. And that's just some of the ideas that we could do to keep the kids engaged. And of course, it's not limited to the Shulchan Aruch, to the meal. It's throughout the Haggadah. I just wanted to share some of those things that we typically do to keep the kids involved. All these games bring small frogs to throw at the kids. Try to think about what it's like when everything turns to blood. They used to say, I read in the Midrash that they would sweat blood. Could you imagine someone goes for a run, comes back, their face is all blood, everything's bloody? It's just ways to make the story more real, more visceral, and more impactful. So some of the games, some of the ideas, of course, everyone come up with their own ideas, but just wanted to share that.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Yaakov. Rabbi Cohen.
Yeah. We're on the phone. Okay, so it's the end of the meal. Thank God we've reached this point. Now it comes time for what we call the afikomen. As the afikomen, hopefully somebody would have found what if it was hidden, or really somebody might have snatched it, which several years it was always snatched. My kids would outsmart me. And the interesting thing is a very big dynamic there in terms of the afikomen. But to put, because it's like almost the symbolism is like Yaakov Avinu stealing the blessings. When Esav goes out to hunt, there's a lot of similarity in terms of that to get the blessings. But simply put, the afikomen is in place of the Korban Pesach, the Paschal offering. We don't have the Paschal offering these days, so we use this afikomen that we have to eat a kazayas at the end of the meal. We have to make sure that we eat as a kazayas or 2 kazasim. I think it's 2 kazasim, right? Right? You have to eat almost like 3/4 of a piece of matzah. In order to fulfill the obligation, because it's really in place of the Paschal offering that we don't have anymore. And after we eat this, of course, we are no longer really allowed to eat anything else. Of course, you've had your dessert before, and you have to eat, of course, the Paschal offering when you're full, because you can't break a bone. It has to be, usually it used to come to the table completely whole, and you'd eat from it. All of the members of the party would eat from it and have to remain whole in its bones, right? You couldn't break the bones, right? So it was all that symbolism of raising ourselves above the scale of idolatry and believing in anything else except God. And so, of course, the idea here is from then on the night, of course, is spent singing and feasting. Oh, we have a lot more steps to go besides that. This is just number 12, right? Someone help me out. Safun. So in any case, Safun really is in place of the Korban Pesach, the Paschal offering, and we're not supposed to. I think people can have coffee or tea after, water for sure you can drink after, but usually no other eating is done after. Back to you, Rabbi.
Thank you very much. Rabbi Chaim.
Okay, can you imagine if a single man, he once found an orphan, and this boy had nothing, he was going to die in the street. He takes him into his home, and he feeds him, and he sets him up, and he raises this kid until the point where he reaches adulthood, and he sends him off, and now the kid is able to be independent and successful. And one day they meet up again. This boy, who's now a young man, he comes back and he visits that man who once took him in. The man has a family now and a great people. They bring him in. He feeds this young man a whole meal, and the young man spends the whole night talking about all the great things that this gentleman had done for him to pick him up when he was an orphan, and gave him everything he needed, and fed him and clothed him and set him up with a job and everything like that. And then he talks about these praises the whole night, and then he just walks out of the house. And so we're spending all night thanking and praising Hashem for all the great things that Hashem did for us and is doing for us and bring us salvation. And we just ate a meal. We should say thank you for that also. We shouldn't forget that. It's just like, it's part of the haggadah, so we just ramble through it. Now is Birkat Hamazon, regular grace after meals, standard stuff. We can't forget that also. Thank Hashem for the meal. Together with that, we have our third cup of wine that that's been with us for this whole Birkat Hamazon, for the grace after meals. And right after we finish, we drink that third cup, also leaning just like all the other cups, and then we move on.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Rabbi Yaakov Vogelernter.
Okay, we pour the fourth cup, and immediately following the third, we pour the fourth cup, and we are going to recite Hallel, the praises of Hashem, the praises of God while holding this fourth cup. But before we do that, we fling the front door wide open, and we say a prayer that God should pour his anger upon the nations that do not recognize you, understanding that all the negative things that happen in the world are a result of not recognizing God. And we are about to praise God and, in essence, pray for a future when the entire world will be filled with the knowledge of God. And that is the feeling that we should have as we open the door and we say, there is nothing that could scare us, right? There is nothing that could get in the way. And we know that Elijah will be instrumental in creating this process. Elijah the prophet will be instrumental in creating this process whereby the culmination will be a world full of the knowledge of God, where we'll have things that happen like what's going on in the world around us, and we'll understand exactly what the message is. There will be a removal of all confusion, because we know it's the confusion. It's in fact that confusion that causes and is the root of all pain in the entire world. And we go on to praise Hashem with the Hallel prayer. This is the text here is taken from the Hallel that we would say on the holidays. We say this text as well as a number of other paragraphs, and it culminates in the blessing that we say, therefore may your name be praised forever. We say it as a prayer for the future. We are now transforming our Seder into a prayer for the future. This is no longer looking to the past. We've gotten the lessons that we need to get to. We have transformed ourselves and our families, the participants at our Seder. We have transformed. We can now look and go full steam ahead to the future, right? Melech Yachid Chei Ha'olamim. And we make the blessing on the fourth cup, Borei Peri HaGafen. Again, we lean to the left and we drink that cup of wine. Rabbi Chaim would like me to mention that after drinking that cup of wine, because it is not part of the meal, you have to make an after blessing like we would always make on drinking an independent cup of wine. And so we make an after blessing for wine, and we move on to the highest point of the Seder, Nirtza.
All right, so my dear friends, we wrap up the Seder with the identical ending to the highest point of a different part of the year, and that is Yom Kippur. There's twice that we say as part of our liturgy, Lishana Haba B'Yerushalayim, that next year will be in Jerusalem, and that is at the end of Yom Kippur and at the end of the Seder. And there are many similarities. Also on Yom Kippur, we wear a white overcoat, a kittel, and on the Seder, we wear a kittel. There are many other comparisons that are brought. And the idea is because at the end of Yom Kippur, we feel like all of our sins have been forgiven. Like now we're ready to fly to the moon. And guess what? At the end of the Seder, we have that same exact feeling, because now we've gotten released from all of that bondage. We've gotten released from all of that slavery. And now we can, the sky's the limit. And we should never ever feel like there's anything blocking us, that there's any type of blockage in that. We dance around our table, we say Lishana Haba B'Yerushalayim. You know what? I'll tell you something, to be honest with you. I don't think there is a time that is more ripe and ready for us to be removed from this bondage, from this Edom, from this existence of I don't know what to call it even. It's this Galus, what is it?
This exile, being
exile. Thank you.
Living tied down.
This exile that we're facing now. Then today, that we're experiencing now, what we're seeing in this world. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of different rhymes and hints that are pointing that this is the time, and we really hope for this more than ever today. Every day we should be saying this to ourselves again and again, not only ani ma'amin, that I believe that one day it will happen. We believe that today is the day, not bechol yom, not any day, today is the day. Today is the day we're ready to pack our bags and go and get on a United flight and go to Jerusalem and meet the Mashiach. So with that, we end our Seder. But I want to open a discussion now for everyone on how to make the rest of our Pesach, because that's just the first 2 nights. What do you do the first day? What do we do Thursday afternoon? What do we do Friday afternoon? And then it goes right into Shabbos. And we have another 8 long days to enjoy. And I want to open up the floor, not only to understand how to maximize the Seder, but the rest of the Pesach. So it's open. I'm going to unmute everyone, and everyone can ask any questions. We'll take them one at a time. Rabbi Cohn, what do you feel is the greatest tool to maximize the rest of Pesach?
It depends if you drink wine or not.
He's saying with the right amount of wine, everything works.
You know what I do? I'm telling you, the height of my always. When I open the door and I do the shvach hamascha, first of all, I dress up as Moses, beard, wig, and I go out and I dance in the street and I scream out loud, and everybody hears me in the entire neighborhood. Thank God I've got nice neighbors, okay? One time a lady came out, I'm a Taekwondo expert, was gonna kick you in the head, okay? Because it was 2 o'clock in the morning. So the height of the Seder, of course, is joy, is dance, okay? And whatever conversation, now's the time. Hopefully, if even after that, the kids passed out, and then you can get into some very deep conversation with the people that are hanging around. That's the best time, really, I hold. They can really talk about the exile, and you can really talk about the redemption, and you can talk about all of the Chidushim and whatever else is going on. That's all I got to say.
Excellent. I would like to just add that I think it's a great time for us to bond with our family. You know, we have beautiful meals, but to have games and to have to share a great time. You know, I told my children, I tell them, you know, the rest of the world doesn't understand what we have. We have Thanksgiving every Shabbos. We don't have to wait once a year. We have it 52 times a year. And then we have Pesach, which is a time for us to just take a break between semesters of school, to just enjoy and to recap and to plan for the future and to just re-energize ourselves so that when we're done with Pesach, we're out to win it after we're done. Rabbi Wogelanter.
I agree with everything that was said. I mean, you got to use the experience of the Seder to focus the next 8 days, because it's the time when we're only eating matzah, right? Everyone has this hang up, right? No chametz on Pesach, no chametz hello, the rest of the year we eat chametz. Chametz can't be that bad, right? But what are we meant to be doing on Pesach is meant to just be experiencing this freedom, experiencing this is like Jewish clean living is matzah, right? It's the bread that connects us straight to Hashem. So just experience that for 8 days. Experience that closeness with Hashem. You know, we end the haggadah with there's haggadah. There's one little sheep, one kid, one little lamb. And what's the last line of haggadah is who comes to knock down all the other forces in the world. However you learn haggadah, who comes to save that one kid? HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So just spend 8 days in that bubble, in the bubble of pure connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, the creator of the world, the master of the universe. And we are the haggadah. We're that little kid. We're that little sheep being taken care of and ushered and shepherded through history by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, by the creator of the world.
Excellent. Thank you, Rabbi Wogelanter. Rabbi Busco.
Yeah. Okay. So aside from the specifics of Passover, there's a very important mitzvah that applies during this time, and the Torah says, "V'somachta b'chagecha," and you shall rejoice in your festival. Rabbi Wilby said, bond with your family. Yes, bond with your family, but also have fun with your family. This is a time for joy and happiness, having fun. And by the way, if you're a husband, I'm saying this out loud, if your wife is sitting next to you, she should listen also. It's a mitzvah to buy your wife a present. You have to make your wife happy. You have to make your family happy. This is an obligation. Not only that, But if you can, if you're on this level, really you shouldn't be working the whole week. Just take the week off. Maybe it's not as hard with our current situation. Maybe you'll find it impossible. Our sages tell us that whatever extra money you'll end up making during this time period, you'll end up losing some way else anyway. So why not just leave it? Leave it. Don't work. Spend time with your family. Have fun. Go do whatever makes you happy, and just maximize your joy and simcha for the whole 8-day period.
Excellent. Thank you, Rabbi Yaakov Wolbe.
So I think one major theme that wasn't I didn't hear addressed so robustly, and that is that at all time.
You're frozen, Yaakov.
Let me try this again. You hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So one of the major themes of Passover, like it is by every day, by every auspicious day of the year, is prayer. And there are a few parts of Pesach that are specifically auspicious for certain kinds of prayer. Number one, the Talmud says that on Pesach, we're judged how much grain we're going to have for that year. And grain is often, or at least is classically considered a substitute for income, for how much money you're going to make over the course of that year. So if you're going to get judged on Pesach for how much grain you're going to have that year, it's a very good time to pray to become rich over this upcoming year. That's A. B, Pesach, we constrict our diet. There's a lot of things that we can't eat. In fact, most things we can't eat. And one of the Hasidic masters says the reason why we have a much narrower diet is that we get hungry. Because when you get hungry, you think about food. And when you think about food, you think about income. And when you think about income, you'll pray to become rich. And therefore, that's one of the reasons why we have a constricted diet, to pray. In addition, the sages tell us that during the time when when the four sons are asking the question, the Manishtana, the four questions asked by the sons, that's a time to pray for your children. If someone doesn't have children, it's time to pray to have children. If someone does have children, thank God, pray that they become righteous. Moreover, I saw like 3 or 4 pages of notes on this by Reb Meilech. He says there's a portion in the Haggadah where we're recounting what happened to the Jewish people by the Exodus, and the turning point is when the Jewish people cried out to God. Vanitzak el Hashem. They cried out to God.
Okay.
And there is a custom that if someone actually cries out to God at that juncture in the Haggadah, whatever they ask for, they get. When you talk about the Jewish people, they wanted more than anything else. They wanted the most difficult task ever to get out of Egypt, to be extricated from Egypt. They cried out to God at that time. Anyone who cries out to God at that portion in the Haggadah and asks for whatever they want, they're going to get whatever they want. It's a guaranteed thing, but you got to scream for it. That's what I heard from the Hasidic masters. Apparently, it's undefeated. If you scream out to God and ask for what you want at that juncture, you get it, no matter what it was, no matter what it is. It's like our afikomen request from God. Pretty cool.
Amazing. Thank you
What was
very
the
much.
actual, what was the juncture that you said? I missed that part.
Nitzak el Hashem Elokeinu. When it's discussing the 5 verses in Deuteronomy, and it takes each word of those 5 verses and elaborates. There's one verse that talks about how we cried out to God. This is towards the end, but like 60% of the way through the Maggid.
It's right before the 10 plagues.
Yes, we cried out to God, and God heard us, and He heard our torment, and He heard our suffering, and He heard our constriction. He heard all those things. That is the moment to ask whatever you want you get.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you. Thank you, Rabbi Yaakov.
Oh yeah. Nice.
What's that? Any questions?
No, we're good. I'm good.
All right, everybody. Have a terrific evening. Have an amazing Pesach. We will be having the Musar Mondays tomorrow. We will be having that class, and then we'll be off till Sunday morning. The Beth Yeshurim class will resume. But otherwise, I look forward to seeing all y'all in good health and with happiness in Jerusalem speedily today, tomorrow, the next day. Maybe we'll have the Seder there. We'll take our matzah and just go there. That's it. What else do we need? I look forward to celebrating Pesach with all of you in good health.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Have a beautiful Pesach, everyone.
Thank you,
rabbis. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.